So there's been a lot of discussion over the last few years about all the things in college football that are heading into the wrong direction. But I think what Indiana did by winning that national championship was show the college football world that not all the changes in college football are negative. Some of them are actually changing the sport in a positive way. What did is something that, has never been done before. And I'm really curious to see if it's something that could ever be done again. Indiana is the first team since 1996 to win their first title. Back in 1996, the Florida Gators won their first title for the first time in program history. And when you go back and look at Florida's history in college football, they really started being competitive in about the early 80s, around 81, 82. So by the time they won their first championship in 1996, they had pretty much been a force in college football for I would say maybe 15 years or so. So like in comparison, like Indiana truly came out of nowhere. I mean, they really didn't have much national relevance for almost the entirety of their program's existence, and they were definitely having some down years before Coach Signetti got there. And 2 years into his tenure, they have two playoff appearances and they got a national championship with an undefeated season, the first 16-0 season since Yale did it in 1897. And I mean, to put that in perspective, like 1897 was before the Titanic sank. We're talking before World War One, the Great Depression, World War Two. I mean, you got to think of all the things that have happened since 1897. Like I think like maybe William McKinley was the president at the time. So I mean, it's a historical run that Indiana has done. Like it truly came out of nowhere. But anyways, welcome to Remotely Wasted. My name's Nick. I'm normally here with my friend Jaden. A lot of you have probably watched this before. Jaden, a lot of people didn't watch our update. Jaden is in the Air Force. He's going through some deployment stuff right now. Couldn't join us for our season finale, unfortunately. But I'm here to talk and get us, wrapped up and, discuss maybe like two early rankings for this season and kind of just reflect on this season and, talk about, my questions for next season and all that good stuff. But first, I want to shout out Miami for having a fantastic season. Miami's a team that on this show we don't show them a lot of love here with Jaden being a Florida State fan. And neither Jaden or I personally like Miami, but I will admit I was wrong about Miami. If you go back and watch the episode that we filmed right before the playoffs started, I stated that I thought Miami was going to get destroyed by Texas A&M in the first round, and they ended up making it all the way to the championship game. And they had to go through Ohio State, and they had to go through Ole Miss, and they put up a very good fight against Indiana. So I hate to say it, but I was wrong about Miami. They're a very good team. They had a chance to win with, just a minute 30 on the clock before Carson Beck threw that interception. Their edge rush was nasty through most of the game. You got Fletcher and Malachi Tony. Those guys are absolute studs. I think what Mario Cristobal has built down there is something that I think could be sustained. I don't know if they're going to be necessarily like a mainstay like in Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or Clemson or somebody that's in the national title like every year, every other year. I don't think they're going to be that good, but I definitely think they're going to be like a bubble playoff team for many years to come. We're going to see what they have back next year. They got Mensa from Duke, stated to transfer over there, but currently Duke's suing because he signed a contract and they want him to honor that contract. So we're going to have to see how that all plays out. But man, what a season for Miami. Um, yeah, I'm curious to see how it all plays out for them down the stretch. But the real story here is Indiana. I mean, this is a team that I think after last year, a lot of us thought they were just a one-hit wonder after their impressive showing in 2024. They lost to Notre Dame in the playoffs. Their only two losses last year were to the two teams that played in the national championship with Ohio State and Notre Dame. And I think that really just kind of made a lot of us think that, yeah, Indiana's pretty solid, but they can't play against the big boys. And then, you go back to the start of this season with Indiana. They played a pretty close game against Old Dominion, and it seemed like the fun Indiana story might be over. But then, they went on to steamroll over Illinois. They were a top 10 ranked team at the time they played. They were able to beat Oregon in Eugene in a game where they dominated the line of scrimmage. They were in dogfights against Iowa and Penn State, and they came up in the biggest moments. Mendoza, throwing that game-winning touchdown in the Penn State game, showing the grit, showing the determination. And they really, proved that they weren't a fluke when they went to the Big Ten championship and they beat Ohio State. I think by the time they beat Ohio State, it was clear that they were a team that was the real deal, but it still seemed just a little bit too good to be true because you had to kind of question, like, is Ohio State really that good? Their only big wins of the season were like a solid Washington team, a Michigan team that was solid, but they had some things going on behind the scenes, as we found out. And then they had a win over Texas, but Texas struggled quite a bit to begin the season. The Texas team at the end of the season was quite different than the one we saw to start. But, then Ohio State loses to Miami, and you're like, huh, like maybe Ohio State wasn't really that good. And Oregon hadn't played anybody, so you're like, huh, maybe Indiana is a fraud. But and you're like, maybe Alabama beats them, but no, they steamroll over Alabama. And they prove it once again. They're one of the best teams in college football. They left Alabama completely demoralized that game. And they do the same thing to Oregon, but may possibly even worse in the next week. And they made a top NFL prospect and Dante Moore look pedestrian at times during that game. It really blew my mind because it was like a 10-point game that first meeting. I thought, huh, maybe Oregon could put up somewhat of a fight, but they didn't. And Fernando Mendoza was putting the ball, exactly where he needed to put it. And that's what, he's one of the two names I'm gonna think about when I think about this historic Indiana championship. Obviously, it's gonna be Fernando Mendoza and Kirk Cignetti are gonna be the two names that I'm thinking about. Mendoza came up with Heisman moment after Heisman moment and had one of the greatest college football moments of all time when he dove for that touchdown on that gutsy quarterback draw call on 4th and 5, and he dove for it and he stretched and went over the end zone. It was just an all-time great moment. And to me, Mendoza is everything that a quarterback should be, not only skill-wise but intangibly. He's an extremely accurate thrower. He's got a strong arm. Like I said against Oregon, he was just putting the ball exactly where it needed to be. He's not the most athletic player, but he's good enough to get you some yardage on scrambles. And he's willing to sacrifice his body for that extra yardage when he needs to, just like we saw last night. After the game, he always gives credits to his teammates. He gives credits to his coaches, gives credit to God. He just always has a good character. He's always got a good attitude, and he's the epitome of a high character player. And I think the Raiders are going to be getting a franchise changing player when they draft him. And I think Coach Cignetti changed the landscape of college football with this win. He showed that you don't need a ton of 5-star recruits and transfers. All you need is some talented guys who have high character and are willing to do the little things that are asked of them every day that add up to helping them develop into great football players that can compete for a title. Can another team do it? It's possible, but it's going to take a very special coach, and there's not a ton of guys like Kirk Cignetti just walking around up for grabs. So, as much as I would like to say, like, oh, this is going to change the landscape of college football in terms of smaller schools winning titles, I don't know. You're going to need a Kirk Cignetti to do it, but he laid out the blueprint for somebody in the future to do it. And that's, to me, that's enough. But with that being said, congrats to Indiana on a great season. Congrats to Miami for a great playoff run, and congrats to all 12 teams who made the playoffs. It was it might be one of the more entertaining playoffs. It's the most satisfied I've felt after a college football season, maybe ever. Like normally it's like Ohio State won or Bama won or Georgia won, and it just doesn't feel all that satisfying, especially all the memorable moments we get every single college football season, just for it to end with like the same old bloods winning after every single season, it gets old, and we got something new this time, and I'm very thankful for it. But anyway, with that being said, I'm gonna give you my top six way too early power rankings going into next season, and then I'm gonna give you my way too early Heisman favorites, and we'll get on the show after that. So I'm gonna try to pull up the teams on share my screen and pull up, the teams that I think are the top six. Um, yeah, we started doing a top six because when we started doing this show, it was still the 14 playoffs, so we would do like the first two out, first four in, but then it changed to the 12 team. And I don't know, 12, adding like 12 teams weekly and trying to figure that out, that's a lot of work. It's a lot too much. That's like too much work, for a non-monetized YouTube channel. So we just kind of stuck with the top six power rankings. My computer is being very slow as I try to um pull up my teams that I think are going to be the top six. So hang in there with me. Don't just click off. Let's get this going. All right, so the first team I have for my number six team, I'm being a homer here if you didn't know, or you could see it in the background. I'm an Oklahoma Sooners fan, and I'm gonna keep it real. That's who I got as my number six power ranking team going into the 2026 season. Why? Well, let's talk about it. All right, there's a lot to talk about here. Because I know some of y'all are scratching your head and you think I'm just being a homer, and that might be true. That might be very true. But let's talk about the roster, some of the changes they made, and why I think they've got a good shot at competing next year. So let's start with the negatives. First off, they're losing some depth on defense. They're losing, some guys that started. They lost R. Mason Thomas. They lost guys like Marvin Jones Jr. Obviously Deion Burks is gone on the offensive end. So they're losing some guys without a doubt. But they still have a lot of good players on the team. They got the Bowen brothers, Peyton and Eli Bowen. They've got David Stone, who's a fantastic defensive lineman, had a lot of playing time this past season. Jaden Jackson's another guy that's gotten a lot of playing time over these past few years. So the D line's still looking very, very good with those two guys coming back. You got a guy like Taylor Wine, who took the place of R. Mason Thomas during the injury, and he really showed out, and he's going to be starting on that defensive line. So we've got a lot of good things going for Oklahoma on the defensive end. You got Kip Lewis announced he's going to come back. He's going to be the leader of that defense. This is his fourth year at Oklahoma. He's been getting playing time since he was a freshman when he was kind of backing up Danny Stutzman, kind of in that rotation. He's a true leader on the defense. He brings that energy. I think the defense is still going to be very good. I know I know we're losing some depth, but at this point, Venables has been able to get the guys that, meet his play style. He's got the right personnel. He's recruiting the right guys for that side of the ball, and he's not going to put out a bad defensive product. It's going to be, I don't think it's going to be as good as this year. This defense for 2025 was a very special unit, and it was very deep. It had a lot of depth, and it was like a top, top one, top two, top three. It was a very good defense. I think Oklahoma's defense is going to slip down more towards like the top 10, top 15 range, but still be very good. But what's really giving me the optimism is what's going on offensively. I mean, I think, the deciding factor in this and the thing that's probably holding a lot of people back from being a little bit higher on us is John Mateer. Like, can John Mateer turn back into that guy we saw the first few weeks? Can John Mateer play like that guy we heard of and saw at Washington State? That's what's left to be seen. But if he gets back to playing like himself, you're getting a very good offense because you're getting a more experienced offensive line. There's three freshmen that were starting on offensive line this year at Oklahoma, going to come back more experienced. Bill Bedenbaugh's a fantastic offensive line coach. He's going to get those guys developed even further, and the O line's looking good. The O line's I'm feeling very good about the O line going into next year for Oklahoma. You got Isaiah Satania coming back at the wide receiver position. You got I can't remember the guy's name. Kid out of Virginia is coming over here. You got Parker Livingstone coming from Texas. On top of that, you got you know Jacob Jordan. You got On coming back. You got Elijah Thomas. Um, I'm forgetting some Jermichael Carter. He looked very good down the stretch this season. You got a very good wide receiver room. I think so. Like the biggest questions you have for Oklahoma really are mostly on the offensive side of the ball, and it's can Mateer get back to playing good in where he's not turning over the ball three-ish times a game. And then, like, can the running game get going? I think there's a lot of talented running backs that have came through Oklahoma in these past few years, and we have not done very well at developing them. We haven't done very well at the offensive line creating space for them to run through. And this is going to be a test to see if this is something we could finally get done, you know, since the last time we had a good rusher at Oklahoma was Eric Gray in 2022. So Xavier Robinson's coming back. You got Torrey Blaylock, and then you got a freshman running back. From my understanding, he's the top running back in the entire country. So let's see if those guys can run the ball. If you can run the ball at Oklahoma and your defense is even close to being as good as it was last year, if it's a top 10, top 15 defense and you can run the ball and Mateer's playing like himself, I think you got a title contender. And it's just up to Ben Arbuckle to make the right calls. So that's my that is my number six, way too early preseason team. At number five, I hate to do this and put this team ahead of us, but it's the Texas Longhorns. That is who I have as my number five preseason, way too early preseason favorite. So going into next season, when we do like our official preseason episode, I'm going to go into a lot more depth. I'm going to be looking at returning starters and transfer portal performance and stuff like that. And I've looked into it a little bit for this list, but this is a way too early list, so we're not going into that much depth. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't mention for Oklahoma, like I said, Parker Livingstone and the kid from Virginia coming out, also a linebacker from Michigan. The tight end room got secured with Rocky Beers coming out of Colorado State. You got I can't remember the kid's name out of Florida. Then you got a guy from Tennessee, Jason Witten, being hired as the tight ends coach. So like Oklahoma performed pretty well in the portal. I think 17th overall so far. So that's pretty good. But yeah, I have Texas at number five. So with Texas, um, Arch improved a lot this past season as the season went on. Um, he was not good to start the year, but as the season went on, he got more confident. Um, learned to balance, running out of the pocket and scrambling versus, passing it. He learned that balance pretty well and he made a lot of good throws. I still don't think he's the most accurate passer. I still think he could get a little rattled in big situations. I'm still not completely sold on Arch Manning, but it's undeniable how much he improved throughout the season. And then when you look at their offense and the things they added in the transfer portal, um, it's kind of undeniable. You got Hollywood Smothers, who I believe was the top rusher in the nation, if not number one. He was like a top five rusher for NC State. Used to play for Oklahoma. He went from NC State to Alabama in the transfer portal, flipped his commitment, and now he's at Texas. And then you also have Cam Coleman, arguably the best receiver in. Well, I wouldn't say that's a stretch. He's not the best receiver in college football. You still got Jeremiah Smith. You still got Malachi Tony. You still got Ryan Williams. But he's right up there. He's fantastic. Didn't have a lot of success. Or he didn't have as much success as you wanted this past season. But then again, Jackson Arnold was his quarterback for the first like half of the season, if not even longer than that. So I can kind of understand. It's unfortunate. The defense on Texas should be strong. I'm expecting their D line to still be pretty good, and their secondary looks okay, but I could see that being the area on their team where they really have some holes in it, and that could be like kind of their weak spot on their team. but I'm feeling pretty good about Texas going into the next season. Hopefully, they don't do good because they're our rivals and I don't like them, but they did a really good job in the portal. Arch is taking a step forward, and it's just like, will he continue to take a step forward or will he have kind of a slump going into this next year starting? I don't know. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Obviously, they got an SEC schedule. It's not gonna be easy to compete playing in the SEC. It's not. But that's who I have at number five. Hate to do it, but it is what it is. Next up, so my number four going into next season, that's going to be Georgia. I like a lot of what Georgia has going on. They got Gunnar Stockton coming back at quarterback. They got Frazier coming back at running back. They did lose some stuff on the defensive end, for sure. They lost Zachariah Branch on the offensive end. That's definitely going to hurt quite a bit. But like I don't know. They were pretty good this year for the most part. They had a few games where they were kind of like head scratchers and they struggled a little bit more than they should have. Um, Auburn, that comes to mind. They really almost should have lost that game. They weren't exactly dominant against Georgia Tech. Lost to Alabama at home, and really squeaked one out against Ole Miss before getting beat by them in the playoffs. But they got Kirby. I mean, I say it all the time. Like he's one of the best coaches in the game. He's one of the best coaches of all time. He's one of those coaches that just always has another trick up his sleeve. He knows how to put a good team together. And with some of like the leadership positions coming back and having some really key pieces come back, and I was looking at their transfer portal and they had some good portal pickups. I can't remember off the top of my head everybody they got, but they're looking good. And for me, they are my favorite to win the SEC at this very moment. And that means that it's the Big Ten's year. My top three teams are all from the Big Ten. The Big Ten is on a roll. I mean, we've seen Michigan win a championship a few years ago, cheated, but they won. We saw Ohio State win last season, and then this season we got Indiana. So that's three straight title games for the Big Ten. And even when you're going back to 2022 or 2023, Michigan played Washington, who's now in the Big Ten. Last year we had Ohio State play Notre Dame, and then this year we had Indiana play Miami, who's in the ACC. So we haven't seen an SEC team in the championship for the past three championships, and that is pretty mind blowing to think about. But that'll get me into my top three. So to give you my third team for my way too early top six power rankings, that's going to be Ohio State. I like Ohio State a lot going into next year. You got Julian Sand coming back at quarterback. He's got a top weapon and Jeremiah Smith, who really like he's so good he could be in the NFL now. The defensive side of the ball, they lost some pieces, but Ohio State, they're just like they're just a model of consistency in college football. There's hardly another team I could think of that's not as, you know, just consistent as them. I want to look at their schedule for next year if that's something that'll pop up. My computer is moving really, really, really slow. Let's see if 2026 will pop up. Um, it doesn't pop up yet. So we're gonna have to wait and see what they got, but they typically have like a pretty workable schedule, with experience on the offensive end, and then with just I don't know all the money they have and their ability just to retool and reload. I think they're a very good team. I just don't think they're as good as my top two teams. So Oregon, that's who I have at number two going into next season. Um, Dante Moore made a decision that is it's just it's not a move you see much of these days. You know, he was like the projected second overall pick, and he decided to come back to school and play for Oregon another year. And Dante Moore has been incredibly smart with his development. He left UCLA where he was starting for, you know, part of that season and was probably the projected starter for the next season. And he went on to Oregon to back up Dylan Gabriel. You don't see a lot of players, be willing to sit on the bench and develop. And then now he's coming back for another year when he could have been the second overall pick. And I know the NIL is a factor in it, and he's probably getting a lot of money, but honestly, I just think it comes down to how smart he is about his own development and trying to become the best player possible. I think he played in that Indiana game, realized I don't think I'm quite ready for the NFL. I don't think I'll be able to do it if I end up on the Jets. I don't think I'm going to be able to succeed. I need another year to grow and to learn even more. So I think it's a huge decision for Dante Moore. That's another one of those decisions I think could change the course of college football. I think it could really, make other guys think twice before they enter the draft. Um, they're losing Will Stein as their offensive coordinator. That is a blow, but they promoted Drew Maringer internally, and that's a guy he's been their tight end coach, co-offense coordinator. He's done an absolutely fantastic job with their tight end room, and I think he's got a little bit of a blueprint to go off under Will Stein, and I'm expecting good things out of Oregon's offense next year, which leaves me to my number one team going into next year. Um, I don't think this should be a surprise to anybody. I got the Indiana Hoosiers as my number one team going into next year. They did an amazing job with the portal over this past portal cycle, which is crazy because, they're also going on a playoff run and preparing for national championships and college football semifinals and things like that. But if you look at it, Kirk Cignetti's not going anywhere. They were able to get Hoover from TCU, and I just expect them to be the title favorite. They've got all the momentum in the world. They don't seem like they're ready to go anywhere. They've got more money now from like billionaires. Mark Cuban's willing to throw in more money now that he sees the direction the program's going in. And Kirk Cignetti knows how to pick the right guys. So I expect Indiana to be right in the thick of the title race. Do I expect them to win a second title in a row? That still sounds a little crazy because like it's not often a team backs to backs. Like Georgia did it a few years ago. Bama obviously did it a few times, but for the most part, it doesn't happen very often. We've seen it a few times over the course of college football, but it's a very tough thing to do to win back to back, especially when you got like 130 teams total that, in theory could compete for a national title. But that's what I have in terms of power rankings for, next season. Next up, I do want to touch on kind of like my top five early Heisman contenders. So at number five, I have our guy, um, Gunnar Stockton out of Georgia. Was just talking about him. He had a pretty solid year this past year with he was kind of getting in that 3,000 passing yard range, 24 total passing touchdowns. Geez, my internet is being so slow today. Let's see what he did on the rushing end of the spectrum. I mean, I don't even think that shows all his stats. He rushed pretty well though. Like I don't know how much his yardage was like, but I feel like he's one of those guys that could get you fight for extra yards. So I mean, he rushed for 10 total touchdowns on the year. That's not bad at all, 460 yards. So I mean, we're looking at over 3,000 yards of production. We're looking at 30 plus touchdowns and a very high QBR. I think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's going to come back even more experienced. He's coached on a very good team and he loves Georgia. He grew up wanting to play for Georgia and I think he wants that opportunity to lead Georgia to a title and I think he's going to go absolutely crazy next year. So he's my number five. Number four, another guy that was like throughout the season, me and Jaden had him pretty high on our list most of this season, and that's Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed um had a pretty solid season. So like his first year, he came out, I think, against LSU and just kind of went crazy and had us all thinking like, wow, this guy's a real phenom. And then he slid back and really was underwhelming the rest of that season. And this year, I feel like he took a step forward. 3,100 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, not great. And then, 22nd in QBR, which is it is what it is. It's not fantastic, but it's not bad. Um, in terms of like a Heisman conversation. Rushed for 6 total touchdowns. He was sitting at about 500 rushing yards as well. So, I mean, you're looking at another guy with 30 plus touchdowns. I think the question for Marcel Reed is like, can he take that step forward again? He took a big step forward year one, or like half the year that he played to year two this year. Like, can he take that next step? Because if he takes that next step, he's going to be a monster. I really like Marcel Reed. I think he's a great player. I hope he has a good year. But we're just gonna have to see, like, can he take that next step? He's losing Colin Klein as his offensive coordinator, so he's gonna have to adjust. Hopefully, the offense doesn't change too much for him, and he could continue to grow as a player. So at number three, I got Arch Manning. I know a lot of people are gonna have him at number one, um, and I get it. He had a pretty good year statistically this past season. 3,100 total passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, which really isn't terrible. 17th in QBR, which is okay for not going to quite get you in the Heisman, but if he takes a step forward, he's definitely looking to be in that direction. He rushed for another 10, almost 400 yards, so we're looking at 36 total touchdowns. Um, I think had Texas been like undefeated or like a one-loss team, he actually could have had legitimately a good shot at winning the Heisman. And I think that's going to be his biggest barrier next year between him and that Heisman trophy is, can he win the big games and can Texas compete for a title and compete for a playoff spot and be really high up there? I feel like the team performance is going to be a big factor, unfortunately, for Arch in terms of like if he gets decided to be a Heisman. Um, Number two, another guy from a team we've talked about. I got Julian Sand. I think he's uh, this will be his second year as a starter. He's got his top weapon in Jeremiah Smith. He wasn't even really, I would say Tate might have been his top weapon this past year, but he's got an elite receiver in Jeremiah Smith coming back. 3,600 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, third in QBR, only 8 interceptions. I don't recall him rushing too much. Let's see his rushing stats. Yeah, he really wasn't rushing the ball like that, but passing, he was great in the pocket. I think if he grows even a little bit in terms of his development, he's going to be another fantastic Heisman candidate for next year. Their schedule is typically favorable. I don't know exactly what it is next year, but he's got a good shot. And then at number one, for me, who I think should be the favorite going into next season has got to be Dante Moore. I've discussed, how impressed I am with him in terms of making this decision to come back to the college game, recognizing that he's not fully ready for the NFL level. And I think he's just a smart player. I think he's got to be the favorite to me. He's obviously going to be favored as the number one overall pick, or he's going to be very high up there. Maybe Arch will be kind of in that discussion. But I mean, you got 30 total touchdowns, or 30 passing touchdowns. You got an additional two on the running end, so 32 touchdowns, 3,500 yards. I think he rushed for like an extra, really not that much, almost an extra 200. So you're looking at pushing 4,000 yards. QBR is pretty solid. The interception's not great. 10's not fantastic. You definitely don't want to be in double digits as a quarterback. He's going to need to cut back on that, but I certainly think in my opinion, he's the most talented quarterback going into next season, and I would love to see him, get an opportunity to win it. I don't really like Oregon, but I do like Dante Moore. He's gonna have Dylan Raiola sitting behind him, and yeah, that's my top five. Some honorable mentions. Maava out of USC. I think he's primed to have a really good year. If USC can compete and start, winning some bigger games, I think you could see Maava kind of surface as a Heisman contender. Sorsby, out of Texas Tech, just left Cincinnati. I think he's a good quarterback. Texas Tech's obviously going to be probably pretty good again. I think he's got a good shot. Jeremiah Smith, mentioned him. Malachi Tony out of Miami. I think he's fantastic. He's one of the best players in all of college football. Hoover, Hoover the Hoosier, going from TCU to Indiana. I think he's gonna just naturally he's gonna be on such a good team. He's going to be considered. And then I like Frazier a lot, the running back out of Georgia. I think he's got some Heisman potential in him. But that's my, kind of way too early top five. And then, I just kind of want to go into, I want to look at the let's see. I want to look and kind of discuss, my biggest questions going into next year. So, I think the first question that comes to my mind when I think about questions I have going into next year's college football season. I think for me, um, can a team truly buy a championship? And specifically, Texas Tech is the team that comes to my mind when I think of this. Um, because Texas Tech is throwing lots of money to NIL. I mean, they're throwing last year it was like almost a $30 million roster, and they got close. They, dropped that game to Arizona State, but ended up with a first round bye, and then, offensively just played horrendously against Oregon. But the defense still played very well. And I guess my question is, like, can you win without like a winning culture in place? I mean, Indiana obviously proved that they had a coach come in and create a winning culture. And I guess like the bigger question I have for Texas Tech is Joey McGuire the right guy to create that championship culture? Or is he simply just a guy that's, taking a very good roster and it's making him look good because he has such a great roster that's being bought and paid for by Texas oil money? And that's the big question for me out of Joey McGuire is like, is he truly the guy to win a championship? That's one of my biggest questions going into next year because if he doesn't, if he doesn't at least win a playoff game, I think some of those boosters and donators in Texas Tech are gonna, start second guessing if he's the right man for the job. Next up, I got what's another big question I have? I guess like um there's a few questions I have. First off, like Miami, are they gonna have Mensah at quarterback? Is this Duke lawsuit gonna, continue to set the precedent that these players are not allowed to break their contracts? We saw it with the Washington's quarterback trying to go to LSU, wasn't able to do it, and he had to go back to Washington. I'm curious if Mensah has to go back to Duke and what that'll mean for Miami because Miami's not looking very good at quarterback without, like Carson Beck's leaving. Mensa, they got at the last second, struck out on Sam Levis, struck out on a lot of guys. So Miami's quarterback situation's another big one I'm looking at. Notre Dame's a big question mark going into next season because they're losing Jeremiah Love and they're losing their other running back. CJ Carr is supposed to be good. People are putting him in the Heisman conversation. I'm not completely sold on them. And I'm also just curious, like, how does Notre Dame respond after what just happened? They feel snubbed. They feel like they should have been in the playoffs. They felt like they were led to believe that they were going to be in the playoffs for almost the entire season, and then they refused to play any bowl games. Really kind of threw a fit. And I mean, I understand it when you feel like um, unfairly treated or if something is like unjust. But I'm curious to see if that like rattles them, if that kind of shakes their culture a little bit. We saw it happen with Florida State a few years ago when Florida State was 13-0, should have been in the playoffs. I know Jordan Travis had broken his leg, but it doesn't matter. Um, you can't and that's a thing that's really been annoying me about college football and the discourse around it is like you can't choose these playoff games based on what you think the best matchups are going to be. You have to look at the resume, what the team has done during that season, and that was the Florida State team that had a win over Clemson on their resume, a win over Miami. They had an ACC championship, and they won the ACC championship with Brock Glenn, their third string quarterback. They had a very good defense. And I know they got like destroyed by Georgia in the Orange Bowl, but Florida State's starters and backups were pretty much all in the transfer portal or going to the draft. So like that was their third stringers playing in that game. Had they had all their starters with Brock Glenn as their starter, maybe they could have competed. Do I like think they would have won a championship? Probably not. But then again, like I'm saying, you can't go off of the future when you make these decisions. You have to go off of the past. But anyways, the next season, Florida State really flew off the rails and only won 2 games. And I think that snub and not getting into the playoffs really demoralized that program. And I'm curious if something similar happens to Notre Dame. I'd like to think that doesn't happen because they've got a lot of, you got Carr coming back. Freeman's obviously done very well keeping the defense and everything going good. But I'm curious, what could happen. Um, and then, I'm curious to see how Michigan's culture is rebuilt with Whittingham coming in, taking over, leaving Utah, was like retiring. I don't know exactly what was going on with that situation. Forced out, some people say, but he's taking over a Michigan team that, while they've been successful over the past few years, a lot of shady things have gone on in the background of that program. And I'm curious to see if Whittingham could really just like turn them back into being a gritty and respectable program. He's got a lot of talent around him. He's got Underwood coming back at quarterback. Um, they're finishing ranked 21. They're projected to be like a 20 something team going into next year. So we're gonna see with them. And then I'm trying to think there's any other questions I really, really have for this upcoming season. I mean, I think the only other question I really have is Alabama. When I'm thinking about Alabama, I'm looking and they they don't look the same. They don't look the same as they did under Nick Saban. Obviously, he's the greatest coach of all time. DeBoer was never going to live up to that standard, but can he like truly make them title contenders? It's it's hard to see right now. It's hard to see that being the case. It doesn't feel right. I don't like it almost feels like had they lost to Oklahoma, he was on his way to Michigan himself. I don't think he likes the pressure of being Alabama's head coach. I think Alabama's fan base is extremely impatient. They want a championship now. They want to win now. So we're gonna have to see. But anyways, those are my top questions, I guess, going into next year. This is the wrap up episode and way too early look ahead for next year. Um, we're gonna keep making content. Like I said, Jaden's gonna be on a little bit of a hiatus from the channel. I think, mainly just do music reactions for the most part. I've recorded a few other videos not related to music. Got a few football things coming up. Got some other stuff, but I think like the most consistent thing I could do is do the music reactions because like I listen to music all the time anyway, so it really doesn't take much work for me to, pop on an album and listen to it and give my thoughts after listening to a song. So that'll probably be like the most consistent thing I do. But there's a lot of things we're gonna do, and when he gets back, we're gonna try some new things and really try to push through this off season. I know if you stuck with us over the years, we typically fall off after the college football season ends. But this year, we're gonna keep making content at least on a weekly basis. We're really gonna try not to miss any weeks, and hopefully, our audience will continue to build like it has over this past year. I want to thank you guys for tuning in this college football season. We went from having just under 450 subscribers this past September when we, got back into the groove of filming episodes, and we ended the season with, we're pushing 9,000 subscribers. So I want to thank anybody that tuned into us. There was several videos this season that got over 1,000, over 2,000. I think we had one video on the college football season that got almost 9,000 views. So we had never touched numbers like that before. And it's funny because we're always just focused on growing more, and we don't get too caught up in the moment. But really to think about where we started and hardly getting any views, and I mean some of our videos still don't get views, But just the fact that some of them do and some of them get, 1,000 plus and people care to subscribe to our videos and sit through our videos, I want to thank you guys. We're committed to growing further. This just like I said and we said in our video, this just started with us, being best friends since high school and just wanting to keep up with each other. Football's, something we always had in common. We just, it was just a fun thing for us to do, for us to just sit down and talk about the games every week. And now it's growing into something that I think is going to continue to grow. So I'm glad you guys are sticking along in the journey for us. And we'll catch y'all for our college football exclusive people. We'll catch you next season. Roll Tide.